Nos siguiente orador está de Puerto Rico. Quizás me tengo vista para más mío papiamento Puerto Rico. También por. Su nombre está Profesor Dr. Nicolás Faraclas. Fanático. Oh, tremendo. Profesor Dr. Faraclas está de Universidad de Puerto Rico o Puerto Rico y atraja el último 30 años de educación de idioma y asunto de manejo en América, Suramérica, África y Sur Pacífico. Esta bon conocido también con la situación de idioma en Aruba, Bonaire y Curaçao. Ela publica varios books y escribe artículos tocante alfabetización y el diferente acercamiento para educación de idioma para gobierno, escuela y comunidad natur parte del mundo. Título de su discurso, hoy tarde, está Papiamentu, idioma de matreks. Su discurso lo está en inglés. Y que llama adelante, Profesor Dr. Nicolás Faraclas.
Bon tarde, Unitur. But I'm very happy to be here, and let's give a big applause to the Fundación for organizing this. Not just organizing this, for all of the things they've done for all of these years, and for all of the things that you've done for all of these years. Big applause. Okay, I just want to say that I'm not happy. I'm not happy for one of those sentences that I have nothing to do with. I am not an expert on the language situation in Aruba or Bonaire in Curaçao. You are the experts. Give yourselves a big hand. Okay, so, yeah, tourism, okay. Yeah, financial haven, okay. But really, what are you getting from all of that? We heard in his poem, what do you really get from this industry? And what's really going to be the key to success for the people of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao in the future? What is your most valuable resource? Well, if you think about it, it doesn't matter how many MBAs you have, how many PhDs you have, MAs, etc. What's going to really count in the future is if you're able to wake up this morning in Venezuela and dance the way Venezuelans do and eat the food the Venezuelans eat and speak their language. And then tomorrow you wake up in Los Angeles and you're eating the food that they have, you're doing the things that they do. This is what the workforce of the future, this is what successful workers of the future need to have. Very fluent competence in many languages and many cultures. Okay? And of all the places in the world, Bonaire is one of those places where you have this. This is your most valuable resource. So basically, if you really want to talk about what's the key to success in the future, you have the basic elements of this already. Okay, in this presentation, we're going to be trying to answer two questions. First, why has Bonaire been able to achieve such a high level of multilingualism and multiculturalism? What's your secret, Bonaire? We want to know. And then I'm going to be talking about Papiamentu as a matrix language to talk about that. And the second question is, what can be done to make sure that you're doing everything you can to guarantee that your people make the most of this multilingualism and multiculturalism? How can you make the most of this? And when we talk about that, we're going to talk about policy. Okay, now this idea of matrix languages, where does it come from? Well, as you know, when people in Bonaire speak, sometimes they'll start a sentence in one language y la terminan en otro idioma. So that's called code switching. You start with one language and you go to another language and you go back and forth between languages. Okay, that's called code switching. But when we linguists talk about code switching, we give different names to the different languages that are involved. So we say that when you do code switching, there's a background language. There's one language that sort of acts as the language that allows the others to come in and go, come and go and come and go. So we took that idea, which comes from what happens between people at the individual level, and we tried to raise it up to the social level. So in other words, when you have a multilingual society like Bonaire, okay, maybe there are languages in the background that have this openness. And people who speak those languages have this openness to allow other languages to interact, to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Okay? And that's what we mean by matrix language. It's that language that invites. Okay, now we talk about the 4 languages on Bonaire. All right? Which one of them is a language that has never been standardized, where there's no police to tell you have to do it like this and you don't do it like this? Faute, exclusion. Which is that language? English? Papiamentu. Spanish? No, you have the Real Academia de Español. Okay, Dutch? Faute. Yeah, in other words, Papiamentu is the one language that never got over-policed, that people don't use so much judgment of others. It's more inclusive, okay? And which is the only one of those languages that's never been imposed on a colony? English? In the Caribbean, we have English imposed. Spanish? No. Dutch? Papiamentu. So if you think about the 4 languages, which is the one that's most likely to be the matrix language of Bonaire? The one that's the most inclusive, the one that's the least judgmental, the one that interacts with the others, that provides a background that will allow the other languages to flourish, okay? And it was a beautiful table that Marta showed us. And let's give a big applause to the 2 oradores. She showed us a table that was proof that actually Papiamentu, the fact that you have Papiamentu on this island is one of the main reasons why you've been able to achieve this multilingualism and this multiculturalism, because Papiamentu has acted as such a great matrix language. Okay, so if we consider Papiamentu to be a matrix language, we have to be very careful with Papiamentu, okay? Whenever Papiamentu is ignored, whenever Papiamentu is devalued, whenever Papiamentu is put at risk, you're also ignoring, devaluing, and putting at risk your multilingualism. Because do you think if there were no Papiamentu and you adopted English, do you think English would leave space for Dutch or Spanish? No. If you adopted Spanish, would that leave any place for English or Dutch? No. If you adopt Dutch, would that leave any place for English or Spanish? No. These are languages that impose themselves, that exclude. But Papiamentu includes. It makes a space for everybody. It makes a space for all those languages and cultures. Okay, where does this come from? What's your secret? Well, think about it. Who are the people who came here? People came from Iberia, the Sephardim. People came from Nigeria and the rest of West Africa. People were already here in the indigenous Caribbean islands, okay? And what you see in all these cases, your mother might speak one language, your father might speak other languages, and then there were local matrix languages already there, local creoles, okay? Here in the Caribbean, you had Island Kari. In West Africa, you have all kind of market languages, and the Sephardim were using Ladino and Mozarabe as matrix languages already. So in other words, all 3 of these groups came here with practicing multilingualism already, practicing multiculturalism already. And so when the ABC Islands are colonized, these practices continued. And all of these matrix languages, all of these practices that people had of using matrix languages converged into Papiamentu. So this is one of the reasons why you've been able to achieve this kind of plurilingualism and pluriculturalism. Okay, now we all know, many of you know about Arawakan languages and Cariban languages, but look at the diversity in your area in terms of indigenous languages. Okay, before colonization, look at the diversity in Central America. Look at the diversity in Northern South America. So we don't only have Arawak and Cariban, but also Warao and Chichan languages being spoken on these islands. So multilingualism was already here before people came from Europe and Africa. Okay, and of course, Caquetillo is down here with the other Northern Arawakan languages. Okay, look, and then West Africa, okay? We know that the enslaved people mainly came from this region in West Africa, and look at the diversity. More than 1,000 languages. More than 1,000 languages. So also the people who came from West Africa were multilingual and multicultural. But what about the people who came from Europe? The Sephardim played a major role in the formation of Papiamentu. And look where they came from. They came from a place that was multilingual as well and multicultural. And then they were thrown out. Where did they go? Well, some went to West Africa, and actually we have a lot of the roots of Papiamentu in the kind of families that grew up in West Africa of Sephardim that ran away from the Portuguese, went to live in African villages, and their children began to speak some form of Afro-Portuguese. So here is a very important part of that story. Of course, we have to, they tried to grow sugar in West Africa. It didn't work. That didn't stop them. They went to Madeira. Then they went to Sao Tome and Principe. Then they went to northern Brazil. Here the Dutch enter the picture. So you have the Sephardim and the Dutch during that brief occupation that the Dutch did of northeastern Brazil. In 1600, that became a world center for sugar production. But it was also overthrown. All of these places were overthrown through resistance of people of African descent, enslaved people. But that didn't stop them. They came to the Caribbean, and that's how they got to the ABC Islands. Now, we can talk about two waves of colonization in the Caribbean. One before the English and the Dutch, and one after the English and the Dutch. The first wave was pre-racialized, okay? The first wave was pre-capitalist. But the second wave was racialized and capitalist. And the transition between these two waves involves Dutch, English, French, and Spanish being imposed as exclusionary standardized colonial languages. And when that happened, people didn't stop resisting. They began to resist through their language, and that's where Creole languages come from. That's a topic we could talk about a lot before, but in any case, that could give you a little bit of an idea of what we mean when we talk about Papiamentu as a matrix language. Okay, what about the future? Okay, what can be done to make sure that you're doing everything you can to guarantee that your people make the most of their multilingual and multicultural competencies? And in other words, how can Bonaire make the most of its inclusive bilingualism? Okay, in our work, we found people saying, oh, chambuká, this is what we do with language in our work. We make the best of a bad situation. We talked to lots of people when we were doing the research project here in Bonaire, and what we found was no matter what their background, people all agreed that language matters on the island are not being dealt with adequately, and also that inclusive multilingualism is the pride and dream of most Bonaireans. But multilingualism is being discouraged by institutional practices. Now, when we do policy, we don't start from zero. We have to see what people have already accomplished. Bonaire has accomplished this high degree of multilingualism, multiculturalism. Give yourself a big hand. That's a major accomplishment. Okay? But you're still not satisfied, because when we ask people, they want more, okay? They want their Bonaire to be even more plurilingual and more pluricultural. Okay, so basically, we had an easy time doing our policy document because you gave us this vision that we tried to articulate in this document. But the question is, will official policy and practice continue to frustrate and discourage that vision of more multilingualism, more multiculturalism, or will it support it? And I think that's what Martha was talking about. Okay, basically, you can see that the number of people, about 35% use 4 languages in their daily life, about 25% 3 languages, about 20% 2 languages. So basically, you have achieved a lot. It's a multilingual island. Also, we have to look at some traps as well. So in the past, people have talked about language policy as a zero-sum game. That means it has to be Dutch or it has to be Papiamentu. We want to move beyond that. Because the vision of the people of Bonaire is not we want Dutch or we want Papiamentu. It's we want Dutch, Papiamentu, English, and Spanish, okay? You deserve better than just one or the other. People value competence in all the languages and think the children should learn to read and write in them. Okay, so, why? Okay, we could say that Bonaire has achieved this multilingualism through the openness and ingenuity of its own people. But also, Bonaireans have made Papiamentu into an inclusive matrix language that doesn't exclude the use of other languages and does not exclude speakers of other languages. And all this was done with little or no support from the government or any official agency. In fact, many of these agencies have discouraged plurilingualism on this island, multilingualism on this island. And these are the kinds of things that they talk about. Practical. Oh, we can't do 4 languages because it's not practical. What? What? Did anybody help you to achieve multilingualism on this island? You did it yourselves. Okay? So in other words, how can they talk about it about being practical or not practical? You prove that it's very practical, even without support from anyone else. Okay? People talk about confusion. Oh, the children are going to be confused learning all these different languages. Are Bonaireans confused people? Do Bonaireans strike you as particularly confused people? No. Even though you speak 4 languages, you're not confused people. So that argument doesn't hold any water. Compartmentalization. Oh, we hear people going around saying, oh, Dutch is a language of knowledge, Papiamentu is a language of culture. We call this compartmentalization. And this is one of the ways that Papiamentu has been ignored in the past. But watch out, ignore Papiamentu, discourage Papiamentu, you're ignoring multilingualism, you're discouraging multilingualism on your islands. Okay, then people say, well, university education in Holland. Sorry, okay. In Bonaire, okay, VWO, it's only 7% of the students. In Holland, it's 23% of the students in VWO, of the secondary schools. Okay, second, okay, and then after you do the test, after you do the final exam, there's only 5% left in Bonaire and 21% in Holland. This is not working. Okay, then HAVO, okay, well, in Bonaire, 16%, and then in Holland, 22%. Pretty good. Yeah, but after the final exam, only 10% left in Bonaire. There are 20% are left in Holland. Oh, but praktijkonderwijs, oh yes, there Bonaire is a winner, okay? You have 10% in Bonaire versus 3% in Holland. So who is the system serving? Is it serving everybody, or is it serving just those few who have parents who speak Dutch, who come from Dutch-speaking households? Because if you look at those 7% in VWO, they mostly come from houses where their parents speak Dutch. Okay, when we talk about policy, we're looking for a policy that tries to make this vision of multilingualism a reality. No language left behind and no Bonairean left behind. Sorry to take that language from some other thing, but anyway. Okay, anyway, so when we talked about policy, we had to develop a general framework, okay, that basically we didn't have to think much about because people were telling us, inclusive multilingualism. What does that mean? Okay, everybody expressed positive attitudes for the 4 languages as long as they were being used inclusively. The only negative things that came up in our interviews, the only things that people didn't like is when one of those languages was being used exclusively. That's what really Bonaireans didn't want to see. That's what made Bonaireans angry and upset. Okay, now Dutch. It's no accident that Dutch is a language that attracts a lot of negative attitudes. Why? Because Dutch has been used as a language of exclusion from colonial times to the present. It's been forced on the people. Okay, so if you look at all of these different things, I like this language being spoken, Dutch. Competence in this language is important to me, not so much for Dutch. Young Bonaireans like to speak this language? No. Dutch, of all the languages, people think of it as the most difficult to learn. Of all the I feel free to express myself in Dutch. It's way down there. Okay. Now, there's nothing about Dutch that makes it less likable or less learnable. Nothing about it. But the problem is the way that Dutch has been imposed. That's the problem. Okay. And also the inflexible and judgmental way that Dutch has been taught, Okay, and if you want a bad example, come visit me in Puerto Rico, because we have a really bad example in Puerto Rico. The United States tried to impose English on Puerto Rico, and what do we have? We have a population that refuses to learn English. This policy was changed in the 50s. The students today still have attitudes against English. That's a lot of damage that was done through this type of policy. It could be that Bonaire is falling into the same trap. Okay? Look, young Bonaireans, I consider myself to be a Bonairean. I consider myself to be Dutch. I consider myself to be Dutch. Look at what happens as you get to the younger generations. Okay? But it doesn't have to be this way. Okay? Look at what's going on in the School Multilingual in Aruba. Okay? They're using Papiamentu as a matrix language to actually teach in all 4 languages. So it can be done in a different way. Let's hope that Bonaire doesn't fall into the same trap as Puerto Rico. But another thing we found in our research, English. So everybody has their story. I had a 2-year-old, I had my daughter. My daughter wouldn't speak. She wouldn't speak to me. We didn't know what was going on with her. And then I was cleaning the house one day, and I was moving her things, and my daughter said, "Stop, that's mine," in English. Okay, so in other words, why? Okay, why is this going on? Is English going to be a killer language like Martha said? Well, if the kids are going to school and Papiamentu is being totally ignored, and even kids are being punished for speaking Papiamentu, what is that going to, that's going to make them turn their backs on Papiamentu. But Dutch is being imposed in the classroom, that makes them turn their backs on Dutch. Where do they go? English. Okay, so if you want English to be a killer language, continue with the policies that you have right now. Perfect recipe. Okay, so basically, again, falling levels of identity with Holland among the younger generations, and also, but falling identity with Bonaire. If you're de-emphasizing and ignoring Papiamentu in the schools, this is going to affect younger people's identity with their own island. Okay. In any case, let's get to the policy recommendations. Okay, Papiamentu. First of all, Papiamentu needs special treatment. Okay, we teach all the languages, but Papiamentu needs special treatment. Number 1, because it's been ignored in the past. Number 2, because it's a matrix language. In other words, Papiamentu is a language, and Papiamentu language practices are the practices that are inclusive, that will allow this multilingualism to happen. Okay, and thirdly, of the few people in Bonaire who speak only one language in their daily life, many of them speak Papiamentu, so we don't want to exclude them either. Okay, what about Dutch? Okay, if you don't want Dutch to be killed by English, okay, you've got to make it, you have to reinvent it in Bonaire as an inclusive language that will attract young Bonaireans instead of repelling them. What about English? The kids come to school with all of this competence in English, but it's all from the internet. It's all from the internet. It's informal. The kids have informal competence in English. And what happens in the classroom? Just like Papiamentu, they take all that wonderful informal competence and you throw it out the window and teach them in Dutch. If you think of the future. Your kids already have that informal, they're ready to learn academic English. And what happens in the classroom? No, you have to speak Dutch. Okay, basically, again, this leads to that kind of alienation that we were talking about. Spanish, okay, Spanish, like Papiamentu, of those few people on the island who speak only one language in their daily life, Spanish is one of those as well. So we have to give special attention to Spanish. Another reason why you have to give special attention to Spanish is because attitudes towards Spanish have gone down, okay? Just like Papiamentu, we have to do some remedial work there with Spanish. Okay, I'm going to finish now. Sorry about the time. Okay, so what are the general recommendations that we made? Marta is doing these very specific, she's doing a great job with the specific recommendations. We just made some general recommendations. Okay, first of all, all 4 languages should be made official on the island. 4 official languages. Number 2, all public and private institutions on the island should actively acknowledge, valorize, and promote the use of all 4 of these languages, while acknowledging that Papiamentu has been marginalized in the past and is in need of special remedial measures as the island's matrix language. And in every instance, a systematic effort should be made to eliminate any law, policy, procedure, or practice at any level of government, in any institutions in both the public and private sectors, and in any and all spheres of public life on Bonaire, that in any way use any of the 4 major languages as a means of exclusion rather than inclusion. This should be done while acknowledging that Papiamentu has been marginalized in the past and is in need of special remedial treatment as the island's matrix language. The best thing that we can do to make sure that all Bonaereans are maximally equipped to succeed in the future is to make sure that they have maximal, informal, and academic competencies in all 4 languages, Papiamentu, Dutch, English, and Spanish. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.